What's going on, everybody, and welcome to At the Gardens. Today is a very special episode, episode 13. We've been doing this a long time. I'm coming to you live from the Ohana School, my brand new school in South Riding, Virginia. We're super stoked to get this going. Construction starts next week. I'm really stoked. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, my name is Garrett. I'm the CEO of Creative Gardens Early Education and founder of the Ohana School. We are personalized learning schools in the area in Northern Virginia, providing you the best personalized education from infants through school-age kiddos. Today, I have a fantastic guest, as always. In my constant search for knowledge and my constant search for understanding around education and early childhood, I do a lot of YouTube diving. And I came across someone that was super cool and also brought a very interesting energy to the perspective of early childhood that was as open-minded in trying to understand these different approaches that I was, and like minds think alike. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, I think I found her on Facebook, and said, hey, I saw your videos, would love to have you on. She was super excited about it. So I'm going to give you an example of what she does. This is one of her videos. We're going to go ahead and watch together, and then we'll introduce her. So here she is.
Hello, everybody. It is day 11 of Quarantine with Rachel, and today we're going to be doing some science. Last week we did the calendar, and we are tracking the weather every single day. This week we're going to hone in a little bit on just the water cycle. You may be thinking, what's the water cycle again? Don't worry, I have a little ditty to help you remember. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation. That will be stuck in your head.
Pretty cool, huh? I thought she brought a lot of energy to it. I'm super stoked to talk with her. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you, and I'm hoping I don't botch her name, Rachel Giannini. Let's hope I said that right, and we will find out soon. In 3, 2, 1, Rachel.
Hi, you were very close.
Say it.
It's Giannini, like panini.
So it's Giannini. Guys, everybody write that down. Let's all take a second. Done and done.
Yes.
Rachel, hi. Welcome to At the Gardens.
Hi, Garrett. Thank you for having me. I am so excited.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit. One, where are you? Where are you coming to us from?
I am currently coming to you from New Orleans.
Nolans.
I'm doing some work down here. I'm normally from Chicago. And when they're like, hey, can you come down for work? And obviously with quarantining, it was this thing of, shall we go down to some place that's not 20 degrees and freezing? We'll go down there. So
yes, I shall.
I will be there very soon. So yeah, so we're here for the remainder of the year. But yeah, New Orleans.
Yeah, no, I love it. My brother got married down there. I absolutely love New Orleans. I think I'm a musician, so I'm a drummer. And love the music down there. Quick little quibble. Last time I was in New Orleans, went into a bar on Bourbon Street. A guy got up with it was some random drummer that was just sitting there playing. A guy got up, sat down, older gentleman, started playing. I was like, this guy's amazing. Turns out he was the guitar player for Gladys Knight and the Pips. So I was like, so this just happens in New Orleans?
Yes.
Because I would go and see that. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy.
It's a pretty magical place. We also got married here, so it's we love it here.
Yeah, we got my brother got married the year the Saints won the Super Bowl, and so 3 days after there was a huge party. It was amazing. So anyway, that's a whole other story. But yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for joining us here today. And this show is really all about education and early childhood and products for kids. And I've had the gamut of people on, but I think the unique thing about you and what you do is, again, I think we're very similarly aligned in, I'm sure at some point in your life, and I want to hear this is kind of the preface to that, you felt a calling to what you're doing now, and to understand and be inquisitive around what really is best practices for kiddos and how to teach them. So if you could tell our viewers a little bit about how you got into being a YouTube personality, an early childhood specialist, probably consultant, I would imagine too. Tell me the whole story. If there was a Rachel Giannini issue 1,
Yes.
let's hear all about it.
First of all, as a DC comic book nerd who goes to many Comic-Cons, I always refer to it as my origin story. Like, if this was my movie, opening scene, panel 1, page
Rain.
issue 1,
Yeah.
in the air. So I straight up, Garrett, I hated school. Like, I grew up in the Chicago public school district. And like a lot of public school districts, it was rows and worksheets and working by yourself. I always tell this story, and people think I'm joking. It's like, no, you can talk to my folks. I remember all of my report cards because every single teacher took the time and the energy to write, Rachel cannot work without disturbing others. No matter the grade, no matter the teacher, I always got that. And I realized later in life, I was a collaborator and nobody knew.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I hated school, and I ended up going to right after high school. It was like, I'm gonna figure out what this world has to offer, and eventually landed on being a sign language interpreter. My sister's Down syndrome, and we grew up signing and being part of Special Olympics and everything. Was like, this is what I'm gonna do. It's my jam. And then very quickly realized I maybe missed a class or two, and they're like, you have a prerequisite. You have to take education or philosophy of education. And it was just like, okay, how hard can this possibly be? I'm going to roll in, get an A, and call it a day. And this woman came in, Garrett. And you are part of the Reggio world. Her name is Karen Haig. She is a BFD. She rolled in. She's like, children learn best through play. And I remember just, it's that because moment, because somebody said something, because you found your place in New Orleans or you got a coffee one place, something happened that really stuck with you. And I just remember my hand shooting up, and it was 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And I'm like, I am so sorry. I know you know this, but explain this to me. And how are we actually doing this? Is this a fun philosophy that maybe they just do in other countries, or is this legit? And I dominated that class. I was totally that person. More questions. And when I got done, I went down to my advisor and was basically like, I'm changing my major. Because it's growing up, my parents were all about going out to the forest preserves and getting dirty and climbing trees. And my preschool was a Head Start preschool. And I was only in it for 1 year, but I remember more about that preschool than anything of my elementary experience. And then it all started coming together of when over 80% of your brain is being developed at this finite amount of time, that stuff sticks with you. And those people have such a lasting impact. And then it just kind of became this really, I don't want to say obsession because it has a negative connotation, but it became a fascination of, well, one, this is so simple. Why are we not doing this? And also, it's so backwards that we're not doing it. Even after having all of this information, it's like, friends, what? Really? And so I got into that. I taught for about 10 years, everything from pre-K to second grade. And my very last year, I was leaving due to the fact of dog walkers were making more than me, and I had student loans, and I was working 2 jobs. A documentary crew called, they made the documentary No Small Matter. They were doing a national hunt for a teacher and rolled into my class, and for 8 weeks, every day, all day, they filmed. And that then led into this entire world of being an advocate, making videos, and I eventually started working at the Chicago Children's Museum after my master's and made videos for them. And really, yes, that's it's basically this whole thing of if you work with kids, that's my jam. Over 8, I don't really know. But before 8, I got you. So.
Well, you called out a couple of really important things that folks out there need to realize, which is, like you said, 80% of your brain, the executive functioning, the frontal cortex are all being developed in permanent ways. that becomes somewhat, it's interesting because they become a little bit more malleable in a couple of different times. Puberty, and then a weird time in senior citizens' lives. It's why you see a lot of old folks kind of change their personalities. But we kind of undersell early childhood education in the sense of, oh, kids, just daycare, whatever, when these are formative years for a child's life. And I think the attention is being very much drawn now back toward, especially with COVID, and we'll talk about that in a second. With COVID, parents are spending a lot more time with their kids, realizing that either they're really overwhelmed or they're really surprised that their kids are able to do the things that they're able to do. And, I think in general, there are more folks needed like you, because I think, after watching your content, and I implore everybody, we'll give all those channels out to all the viewers, there's an excitement. There's so many videos, Rachel, that I watch that are like, welcome to my classroom. Over here today, we're going to make a bird. Here is your bird. Here is one piece. Glue this piece on this piece. And you're just like, well, how are you supposed to be inspiring kids if you're not inspirational yourself? If you're not being authentic, then how are you trying to deploy authentic learning experiences to kids if you're not being authentic yourself? I talk a lot with my team about, well, if we're going to teach yoga, then y'all need to be doing yoga, because kids are way more intuitive than we are, and will pick up on the fact that you're full of S, for lack of a better term. I mean, I'm sure we can both say that educators out there, my friends, we curse like sailors when we get home, because we save it all throughout the day. It's all built up.
Garrett, I think we're related. I think we might be like long lost siblings.
I don't know. No, because your story, the funny thing is I was thinking the same thing. And I'm also seeing a guy that's airboxing out, walking by. Anyway, like literally airboxing. My story is this. I was terrible in school. Well, actually, I was a straight A student up until Cue the Tiny Violins. My father passed away when I was 15. And at that point, my grades tanked. My interest in school tanked, and I started really thinking after all of this, right, probably in like 19, 20 years old, why wasn't, and not like woe is me, right, but like I was a kid, my mom was working 16 hours a day to support our family. Where were the educators that connected, that said, oh, this guy just, and a little bit of information that I'm very open with, my dad died of AIDS when I was 15. So to have that experience, and to have a gay father and have a father that died of AIDS, and no one to connect with, right? No one to say like, oh, this kid just lost his dad. Why? Of course his grades are tanking. No, the expectation was always there. So that kind of said, well, where have we lost this connection with our students? Why are we not connecting with them? Which got me into Montessori, because Montessori is very intrinsically motivated, independent learning, really working for yourself and not for others. So that was kind of the resolution in my head, was to say, well, if I didn't have this experience, I want to make sure that, teachers focus in on connection and allow the students to kind of create their own learning, and to really dictate what needs to be done in their education. And that kind of sent me down the path of like Montessori initially. And then I started looking around at Montessori teachers, and they would say, well, that's not Montessori. And if a child didn't, perform an activity over time, the thought process was, what's wrong with that child? Not what's wrong with my approach, which, I think is the core issue, right? And so that's kind of dove me into the same kind of career path. So it's funny that you say, are we relevant? I feel the same thing, because I think it always spawns from this sense of, we can have a cell phone that iterates every 6 months, but we can't change education from the 50s and 30s, really, where we're preparing kids for factory work.
Yeah.
Like line up, stand up, it's ridiculous.
It's the amount of undoing that has to be done, which it's nothing is a hurdle we can't jump over. There's literally, I was so funny, I was talking with my husband last night, and we were talking about like breaking it down, like what's the first step in this game of whack-a-mole. And one of the very first things is really that terrible phrase, those who can't do, teach. It's this idea of like, do you understand how utterly incredible teachers are? And let's go back all the way to early childhood. And No Small Matter has this amazing, I'm a sucker for data, where if like in this Venn diagram, over 34 million children over 11 million children spend over 34 hours a week in the care of somebody other than their folks, right? And in this circle, you have over 80% of this brain is being developed. Where those two circles intersect, those are early childhood educators. And the idea
that is like the most brilliant way of putting it.
But it's serious where you think about it. It's like those children go off to become doctors, lawyers, politicians, and the best part is they go to become teachers. Like Garrett, you became a teacher because of teachers. How many students in your class are going to become teachers because of the experience you gave them? Like I have been across this country from Alaska to Key West, and I will have people come up and say, oh, I went to a high school graduation of a preschool student. And I asked, was every single teacher they had at this graduation? And they say, no, it's just me. I've been to places where I have 9 people who've come up and they've gone to weddings of preschool students. And I asked, was everybody at this wedding? And they're like, it's just me. The amount of connection that we have with students is unflappable. And it is sincerely like, do anything, like think about it, 20 years, you can go to a lot of open bars, like stay in for that. Like, I'm really
Yeah.
about all my students now being like 15 and under. I'm like, man, I got like 7 more years and then I'm going to get invited to a lot of good.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing that I've seen is being a Montessori educator in my early career for 7-8 years, having those inspirational moments. It's interesting because I'm a guy in this industry, right? Which is
unicorn.
Which is a real difficult thing. And even going through, and not woe is me, right? Like, trust me, I'm not like this world, really oppresses white men. You know what I mean? Like that just doesn't happen. But in my career field, there is kind of a reverse sexism in the sense of, going through my Montessori training, I was like you in school, stoked. Once I found it, once I loved what I loved, I was like, oh my God, this is everything that I've wanted. And from then on, it really, honestly, I can truly say it has not felt like work. I've taken it like farther and farther and farther as you have, like in driving your own success. But for me, I have the experience now of teaching kids in a Montessori environment and watching them grow and watching them now become an adult. My first classroom is now getting out of college. So I watch, and a couple of my kids, one of them, this girl, Sissy Sheridan, is now an actor on, shows with, on Netflix. And she's a huge TikTok star, like 6-7 million followers on TikTok. But owning herself, right? And for me, that's everything. Like, I don't care what you do. I don't care who you are. I don't care your gender, your identity, your whatever. Just own it and not be apologetic for it. And that's what I always taught. And it's funny that you mentioned that because you now, and I'm sure you can relate to this, not only are we going to have some really awesome parties, but these kids, whether they're successful according to society, doesn't matter. For me, the success is I am who I am, and I 100% own that. And I don't apologize for it.
No. Well, one, I want to say thank you for being part of this industry because I think we obviously need a lot more men because I can't help but think that in a field that's 97% men, we would not be making what we make.
And again, that is a very valid point. My friends out there listening, there we go. She makes a great point. We elevate, and it's sad that we would have to say, like, put guys into the career for the actual, for teachers to be paid more, but that's freaking reality, man.
It is. It's totally reality. And also, and it's funny because you are obviously living it, but I can tell you, you can go being the most favorite toy in a school and a man can show up and then they're like, what's your name again? I got Garrett now.
It is true.
Good times. We played all the time. Like, where's Mr. Garrett? You're like, but remember?
And I'm over there like just boring as hell, like reading a book.
Watch me.
No, it's funny. I had my first Montessori classroom was it became the most popular classroom in the school because Mr. Garrett. Now, mind you, I think anybody that goes into early childhood, and I'm sure yourself included, has kind of a Renaissance person attitude, can do a lot of things well. I'm a musician. I play all kinds of instruments. I bring that into the classroom. I still to this day bring that stuff. Now I own schools, so I just walk in and get to do all the fun stuff without the BS. Yeah, get them all riled up and deuces, I'm out.
See you
But,
later.
exactly. So it's so interesting that the career in which you're doing specifically, and I'm really interested to hear about the movie. I think I found you in a different way. I found you looking for Reggio stuff. And then there's this movie that was made. So talk to the viewers a little bit, and talk to me a little bit about that experience. Obviously, we went over it a little bit. So how did that happen? How did that all get into place?
It was kind of bonkers. It was I already applied for grad school. I knew I was getting close to leaving, and it was just this like, okay. And also, you know how it is, like you've had the kids for 3 years, and there was enough going where you're like, I can make a clean break. And I had a mentor at Erickson Institute, and all of these major institutes were hit up of like, hey, we're looking for a classroom, ideally diverse. I taught, the classroom was a preschool for all, so it was primarily at-risk children. And we're looking for a play-based, very developmentally appropriate classroom. And it was so Hollywood, Garrett. Like these two people came in. One of them is Dr. Ben Mardell out of Yale, who is incredible, and a director. And this was the day, like I got a phone call, like 2 people are going to come see your room. And it's like for quality control, like what? Okay, whatever. And it was the day that like fires, garbage everywhere. And they came in and they looked around and they're like, thank you, and left. And I'm like, well, that was it, children.
That is always the case, man. Like when parents come in your room and you're like, it's not normally like that. It always is like that. It's not.
And then they came back like 4 more times and did more observations. And then next thing I know, we're meeting with lawyers. And so the film is called No Small Matter. And as the Hollywood Reporter says, it's the way we're changing the way we look at early childhood ed. And it's actually, I love it. It's super tangible. It focuses on birth to 5 and there's a lot of different vignettes. So it covers like families who can't afford childcare. It covers families who are looking and realizing very quickly what childcare looks like and access to high quality. It also takes on the role, looks at a school and what does it look like when you can't pay your teachers. And it's really thoughtful because of the fact that it gives you lots of information, but it's not all talking heads. So it's actually entertaining and like Cookie Monster's in it. And you can leave this film, like one of my favorite, we were on tour, one of my favorite examples of how powerful this film is we're in LA, 8 people are there. Lights turn up, we do Q&A. And there's a gentleman sitting by himself and he raises his hand and he goes, I didn't know this was a problem. And he just rolled in off the street. It was a free documentary. And he's like, why aren't we talking about this? And all of a sudden, it hit me that you can't fix a problem that you don't know you have. And No Small Matter really shows you what does it look like if you invest and hold out your executive function for 18 years because this world looks totally different. And it gives you a lot of like really staggering facts that people like the Snapple moments where did you know that over 74% of 18 to 24-year-olds are unable to join the U.S. military. They can't join if they want to because they're too poorly educated, they're not healthy, or they have a criminal misdemeanor. All of that can go back if they had a quality early childhood experience would alter that. They talk about how if you actually want to do prison reform, you need to do early childhood investments. And if you want to talk about toxic stress, like you need to do early childhood investment. And it really it just gets to the point in a way that you don't feel stupid, where you're like, oh, I guess I should have known that. It leaves you feeling motivated and really angry. So it's been, it's available on Amazon now because it came out last year. But yeah, it's been really incredible. Like, just like a little plug, just to show you how powerful it is.
Big plugs. Yeah.
Oh, we screened it in Alabama to their House Ways and Means Committee before they decided to pass their budget. And they passed a historic $7.4 billion budget that went to early childhood ed, gave 267 new pre-K spots and a 4% raise to all of their pre-K teachers. Like, yeah.
Again, that is amazing work. And like you said, I think about things like racism, bigotry, those things don't stem from choices. Those things stem from a lack of exposure and a lack of education in understanding. And oh my God, I mean, one, we here at my company and the schools that I'm building, we pay $2 above the average salary in our area for every position that we have. That goes from cooks, that goes all the way to our lead teachers, and then we also provide pathways so that when teachers join us, they very much visually see, here's my job, here's how I can make more. Because that's, I think, where the disconnect is. You don't have truly inspired educators that don't burn out unless you're making it worthwhile for them, not only in the attaboys and making them feel good about what the work that they're doing and how important it is, but then also so that they can further support their families, so that they can further see growth in their lives, so that they don't have to worry about, getting a second, third job. As we all know, like when I was teaching, I taught, I ran the aftercare program. So I was working 13 hours a day, and then I would get off and teach guitar lessons and babysit. So there were all of these different, things that I had to do. Like you said, dog walkers were making more, and not to put dog walkers down as a position, right? But it points very much out, if you're at a public school level requiring an educator to get a degree, right, which is not free, it's this, and you get a degree for ROI, you get it for a return of your investment in success and happiness and financial growth. Now, all of a sudden, you're putting a teacher that spent more money in 1 year than you're paying them.
Oh, yeah.
To be there. How do you expect teachers to have a vested interest, to have a stakehold in the outcome when they're worried about their own family's outcome? Like, it does not make sense.
No, it's the one thing that you said that I really want to highlight is the fact of nobody gets into education, specifically early childhood ed, for the money and the fame.
Yeah.
And the idea is, like, we are very well aware as we are going through our classes, as we are taking out those student loans, we are completely aware that we are going into a field that the average in this country makes $11.67. We know that. And the fact of, like, for 10 years, I worked 2 jobs. For however many years, you worked 4 jobs. I don't know an educator who doesn't. And we show up every day excited. And we show up every day giving those 8 hours our all. And I think that speaks volumes to how much early childhood educators truly care about what we do. Like, we know, like, hey, it's going to be hard. And also, while you're in school, all that's going to be hard too. But we do it. And we do it with this level of passion. And that's the problem, is we burn out so quickly. And so unless somebody like yourself and your school is there to, 1, show you that there is a path, 2, provide you a more sustainable monetary income, and does give you those attaboys. Because when you're only talking to 5-year-olds all day, having an educator come up and say, you're really important. You are utterly incredible. Thank you for all you do. That's all you need sometimes. I mean, that's not going to pay your rent, but it's enough to make you show up the next day with a big smile on your face.
And if you have a work situation like that, it bleeds, like if it's a negative fear-based mentality of leadership that you're working at, it bleeds into every aspect of your life. You don't look forward to getting up and going to work. I'm sure husband is at home, you come home and you're like, oh, these parents that are telling me, and my own job is telling me how to do my job, and they don't really know. And I think that was a real strength of what we do here is, I've worked like my story is I started in an aftercare program at a Montessori school because I never went to college at that point. And I was like, I got to figure this out. I was just in a band, and I was trying to find a job that would be cool with us touring and give me the time off. And So started there, but then worked literally my way up to running that school as head of school, and then becoming a regional director of other schools, and then founding my own school. So that kind of experience in general allows me to have the perspective to sit in each one of my employees' positions to say that this is the most valuable job. So I think it's so important, not just in our industry, but in any industry, that you have the mentality of your folks don't work for you, you work for them.
Oh, yeah.
And you support them, because especially in this industry, because again, if there are teachers in a classroom environment, and their job is to support a personalized education for these kiddos, then I need to give them a personalized experience as an educator, because then again, that authenticity bleeds down, and it becomes super authentic in the classroom. If you have somebody nurturing you, taking care of you, and they know that, and that it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes.
My favorites.
Fail forward.
The best. Failing, nothing is better than having a rug time that just goes sideways and looking at kids like,
love it.
Didn't work.
Yep.
That didn't work at all.
You're
Should have picked a smaller book. What else should we have done, kids? Like, nothing is better than, I love it when parents who think they have an idea of what preschool looks like, and then they come in and see, because as a Reggio teacher, I love documentation. Like, I live and die by documentation. Otherwise, you walk by my room and you're like, they're playing. And that's another soapbox. But the idea of, like, here's everybody's binder. Look at this entire board showing you what they're learning. And all of this, like, lovely play, you say.
Give me your foot, kid. There you go. Yay, it's a project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And being able to see a parent come in and, like, wow, how you talk with the children, how they engage with each other, there's a level of respect that you don't, these are your peers. They are your co-learners. Like, any teacher who rolls in thinking they know everything, it's like, that's adorable, because you now have 20 new students, or 20 classes, I should say, every year, and you need to figure them out. Like, those are puzzles that you need to lock and break into. So if you think for a moment that, like, talking to everybody in a certain way, in that row, and here's that paper. I love seeing parents like, I didn't realize childhood education was supposed to be this way. It's like, oh yeah, good education is.
Yeah, and I think we must be related, because the motto that we have around my schools is drop the ego, trust the child. So the idea is that, like you said, it's almost like stand-up comedy, right? Like, you get up and you're leading these meetings that potentially you could have planned 2 hours the night before for. You're making water cycle graphs. You're making, we're doing Earth, the Earth goes around the sun, Montessori celebrations, like all of these different things. And then you get into the moment with your kiddos and it just absolutely tanks. You can either learn to love that, like I think we do, or you're going to burn out, because your expectation of what those moments should look like is not where the good stuff happens. The good stuff happens if you're truly listening and observing in the classroom to understand, okay, if that didn't work, why didn't that work?
Yeah, and asking them, because you know what? They're the experts. They will tell you why it didn't work. They will straight up let you know. And I love your guys' motto, because that's one of the first things I tell teachers is the idea of, like, it's not about you. You've done this. Like, I don't want to say, like, you're already boxed up and shipped out, but you are. We're still building this one.
Yeah.
Focus on them, because man, you know this. You're an adult. Like, what's your agenda?
Exactly. And we as adults, adult humans, put our own, and parents do this a lot too, put our own perspective and experience on our children and then respond accordingly. So, like, let's say they're coming by your class. Oh, are they just playing? When I was a kid, we had to sit down at a desk and work for hours and hours and hours. And I always try to put that, well, how did that work out for you?
Yeah,
did you enjoy your school? Yeah, did you enjoy your school experience? In fact, just because you're commenting on this, it tells me already that you have some kind of insecurity around this. So, it's really interesting, because again, This show specifically, I tend to always gravitate towards people. Like when I found your content, I was like, I get it. Like I get you, and I get what you're trying to do here, which is just, I mean, if we can expose people, one, it's kind of like the scientific method, or like a PBL, if you will. If we can expose people to the problem, here's your problem, guys. Problem is, school is awful. The way that we teach kids on a public level is fundamentally wrong. And so now let's figure out, like with folks like you and I, how that's going to look down the road. And I feel like the work that you're doing right now in exposing people, in providing content in general, in becoming almost your own media company for early childhood, is starting the conversation with the guy in LA. You don't know, that guy might be some rich producer that can actually make something happen. You know what I mean?
For sure. And I will definitely say it's been interesting. I have, from the film and from videos, I have friends in very high places, and it's amazing because they're now actively thinking about moving forward, not necessarily with myself, but the idea of like, hey, can you talk to us about like, what does it look like to make something that's this? Because one thing about my content that I put out there, it's funny, it's not really for teachers, it's for parents. And I kind of want, my goal is for parents to, one, realize that they're their child's first and best teacher. And due to the fact of like, you did not go to school for this, I did. And if you have 250,000 neurological connections being made every minute, then every moment's a teachable moment. So here are some very simple, basic things that you can do to, one, prepare your child, but at the same time, prepare your own expectations. Like if you roll into a school and everything that you've been watching online does not look like what's happening in a classroom, maybe that's not the school for you. Like you should really realize how capable your child is, how just listening to them and engaging them authentically goes a long way, and how you should be in control of that. Like you should be able to put them in a place that holds those same values that we put out there. So
no, absolutely. And I think too, like I think in what you're saying, that, you know, I kind of put myself in a classroom experience of, you know, in my classroom, even if we were to move furniture, like that was a discussion, right? That was like not me just moving stuff. It was, guys, you know, I'm kind of thinking about moving this. What do we think about that? You guys aren't really using it. So where do you think you guys would want it? Oh, over here. Or even better, we do this a lot, and I talk to a lot of folks about this, which is the classroom constitution, right? Is rather than say, hey, kids, day one, these are the rules, and you better follow them. What are the rules, guys?
Yeah.
And not only what are the rules, what happens after that?
Exactly.
You know, what are these? What happens when you break the rules? Is there consequences?
Yeah.
Do we, you know, we need to come up with this together because there's ownership in that.
We live here. You will see me more than you will see your parents. Like we need to figure this out. Like one of my favorite conversations we ever had is we had a you know where it is, where you have that straight up runway. It's like, you're like, if I would have moved that bookshelf a little bit, we wouldn't be having that problem.
That's a broken arm. That was a broken arm in my classroom, actually. So,
and we had a whole conversation about like, is this safe? Is this in line with the rules that we have of not running? And how can we adjust our room that better resembles our expectations? And also, like, where can we run? And then like doing hardcore time trials outside.
I love it. And even if you could find, like, if a child comes to me with a rational, like, well, we can run inside, but it can be here and do this, and this is why it's safe. Hey, cool. That sounds great. As you know, like for me, it's about just how I do with like even parents at the school is like, you know, I'm so open to trying to hear what parents want, so open to hearing what students need in the classroom. Because I think that taking the ego out of the whole thing, right? To say, I'm not going to say, this is my classroom and this is how it's run and you follow. I'm not going to say, this is my school, this is how things go, and then you follow. It's much more of, well, what do you want? Well, what do you need? Like a parent today, COVID, and a parent last year even.
Totally different.
is a totally different parent with different needs, expectations, and wants. And so, segueing that, obviously COVID, we watched a little video earlier on quarantine with Rachel. I personally love this question. My career has been in creating school models, right? So I started as a Montessori educator and then a school founder, but then that led me to alt school, which was the big guy at the time. I saw a TED talk with this guy, Max Ventilla, who was like saying a lot of the things that we were saying, but he was like, and we can use technology to inform content if we upload different approaches, scopes, and sequences, things like that. And that was stuff I was already thinking about. That plugged me into a very similar experience again, the upper echelon of players, right? Like now all of a sudden I'm working with, Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel. These are all investors in this partnership that we've made. You start to really see that transformative change is happening. There's always been a block. There's a point in me saying that. There's always been a block to the public level of education. You see a lot of these classrooms or a lot of these school systems adopting now learning LMSs and things like that into their schools and platforms that support personalized learning now. What do you see as the biggest effect that COVID had on education as a whole moving forward on the early childhood side of things?
Yeah.
That's a big question, right?
It's a huge question. That is a huge question that we have an entire other podcast for.
Yeah.
Just to start off, the idea that the massive amount, oh man, there's a lot of parts. Okay, focus, Rich. The massive amount of our lack of funding and our lack of investment and the fact that over 4.5 million childcare centers have closed speaks volumes.
From COVID.
In the last 4.5 million childcare centers have closed.
It's insane.
Isn't that bonkers? And having known a couple of these places that were women of color who started off at the home center and then grew it, and it was sustainable for 15 years, and then they had to close doors. Like, it is heartbreaking. The fact that we did not do anything, there was no safety net. And all of those children are now, like, their wait lists are massive. The schools that exist under COVID protocol, which is great, but they're unable to, there's 4 kids or 5 kids, and so their teachers are losing jobs. In regards to children as a whole, it's funny. Kids are super resilient. Obviously, there's going to be a massive amount of grad school longitudinal studies that are coming out of.
Oh my God, anxiety, depression, all of it. Yeah.
And all of it's super real. It's really interesting to see children who are 3 engage with masks. There's just a lot. There's a lot with I'm very curious to see what this looks like in the long term. But when it comes to this platform of introducing technology in a way that is not normally part of the classroom, first of all, am I pro technology? Yeah, I am, because there's a lot of really incredible people out there. Like, is there a lot of garbage? Heck yeah. There is a lot of garbage, but there's also companies like Sago Mini, and there's people like Chip Donahue who are like, let me think about how this can be the most individualized, because that's the key that you can't necessarily always have. And how can we use this almost like a provocation, as much as you would a snake skin or an acorn or something outside? Like, how can we use technology as a provocation for them to take that into the real world and explore? And I think that that's something that we don't really tell parents why we're using technology. They just think of it as a screen. It's like, yes, but how are we using that screen? So I think that there's a lot of good that's coming out of it in that way, because I think people are seeing, like, this is going to be the new phase. Technology will be part of classrooms moving forward. Is there super problematic issues about people not having access? Yes. People not having internet? Definitely. And oh my gosh, and how is that continuing just to perpetuate the achievement gap that's happening? But I know, it was like, but as a whole, as an idea, I think it definitely has a place. I think children are going to be resilient. They're going to bounce back. Again, super excited to see all of the studies done in 18 years. But one thing I want parents to realize is a good teacher gets this. And they may be home for a whole year, but next year that we can heal. Next year we can do those hands-on. We can really quickly help with any kind of social emotional component through literacy, through just social emotional curriculum that we can like start to
goal setting, yeah, things like that around. But I think you point out a huge issue, which is the inequitable system when it comes to education and the expectation that's what drives me crazy. I live in Loudoun County, Virginia, right outside DC. It is one of the richest counties in the country. You know, I'm a transplant from, I mean, I grew up in Virginia, but a much lesser income situation than most. And so I have that perspective, right? And I think that perspective is important. It's the reason why we're a subsidy school.
Yeah.
It's the reason why we offer our services to low-income families, because a socioeconomical diversity and a cultural diversity is a secret sauce for an amazing community.
100%.
And what I struggle with in this community is the expectation, not only by our school system, but by parents in general, that every kid is going to have their parent next to them, doing work with them. Can you imagine, right? A kindergartner, knowing this is our wheelhouse, knowing the mindset, perspective, capabilities of a kindergartner told to sit at a screen for 8 hours with content that is completely uninteresting to them.
Yeah.
And with no kind of assistance or help in keeping that on track. Yeah. Yet then hold them to the same expectation as, a very, well-to-do person with, the optimum office under their bunk loft bed, So you see, and if that's the case in Loudoun County, because people forget that no matter what area you're in, there are low-income families. Yeah. There are families struggling for food and using and rely on our government assistance. And with that government assistance failing, they're even in worse situations. So the expectation to have that all there, I see your point. And all right, well, it's great that all this tech's being introduced, but is Timmy, who lives on welfare, has 7 kids in his house, and they all share one device, and that's an iPhone. How are you going to even say that our system is equitable when it comes to the delivery of quality education? So I think the interesting thing about, for me, what's going on with education is that where that takes place is starting to become redefined.
Very much. And I think that this topic that we know very well, but this complete disparity is something that a lot of people are seeing, and they're starting to pick it up as their cause and starting to realize, okay, this isn't fair. This isn't okay. And how can we make it better? And that is something that will take a very long time, and a lot of the systemic issues are massive. But the fact that you can't move the needle unless you have conversations, and the fact that conversations are now happening is one of those. I'm given, as always, the glass is half full. I'm giving a little bit of optimism of at least we're talking about it. At least we're aware of it, because now we can make change. Again, back to the whole thing. You can't fix a problem you don't know you have. So
yeah, and I think you can probably relate to this. Is I've been preaching this for years and years and years. And the funny thing is I've been doing live content. I've been doing just content in general for a long time. And I always refer back. I'm like, oh, well, if you don't believe me, 10 years ago on Facebook, I was saying the same. And the funny thing is now is that whereas I'm sure we sounded like crazy people, because people are so stuck into, here's what the system is, here's how I went to school, so that means that my child should do the same thing. And I used to tell people 10 years ago, well, don't you want better? Yeah. Don't you want better for your kids? Yeah. And now all of a sudden these things are becoming actualized in reality, where, I hope down the road that what this did for everyone regarding where we learn is, let's say there's that kid with a huge amount of social anxiety, right? That is crippling, that is diagnosed. that they're in treatment for, yet they're forced into school in an environment where they're bullied, and they're, and those kids end up committing suicide, and those problems get bigger. What if that student could, for the safety of themselves, be at home, engaged in a virtual learning environment, very similar to what we're doing now in this hybrid environment? Like, I'm hoping that, because I'm always looking at the learner. I'm always saying, we know, especially with Reggio and the 100 languages of learning, like, we know, Gardner even said it too, is like, kids all develop differently. We all learn differently and in different ways with different subjects. So if we know that, then at least this is one step in that direction of, like, even situationally, we can change the way in which we educate simply by having kids feel more comfortable, more regulated in themselves, to allow that sponge to kind of get squeezed out and get reabsorbed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. It will have very interesting stuff to look forward to in 18 years.
That's exactly right. I love it. So we do unfortunately have to wrap up the show. I feel like, Rachel, we should maybe start our own podcast.
Yeah,
and maybe just keep going and going and going.
Garrett and Rachel, talk education.
Yeah. What'd you say?
I said, Garrett and Rachel, talk education.
And if we could screenshot that, guys, that will be
the
graphic. Yeah, it's exactly right. Rachel, thank you. My friends that are watching out there in my community, follow Rachel. And that being said, Rachel, where's the best place they can check you out? I'm going to throw it up on the screen.
Let's go ahead and go to Instagram, and it's Miss Giannini.
So it's Miss, like, M-I...
No, just
M-S. Giannini. INI.
So the goal for 2021 is to do, and this is a goal. Goals are lofty. Is to put out content daily, activity of the day. So it's one of those, like, super small things. Even if it's one of those, like, when you decide to pour that orange juice in the morning, pour it into a measuring cup first. Like, just like super basic things. But that's where it's all going to live, is on Instagram. So.
I love it. So she has a YouTube channel. She has an Instagram. I'm sure it's all the same things on all the things. Are you on TikTok?
I'm in my 30s. So
dude, I'm 40. I'm 40 and I'm on TikTok. I get my thing is, if you want to get people, go to where people are.
Really? My whole thing is, like, I grew up near an Amish community. Like, I'm pro zippers. Like, I just moved so, like, the idea of, like, I hear you. I've been told this before, but I'm like this old curmudgeon. Like,
I know. Trust me, I feel the same way, and I still feel stupid getting on there. But my goal is to, like, I'm sure yours is, whatever needle I can push forward, even in the littlest way. If I can, it sounds so cliche, but if I can help one kid or one parent or one educator push forward, then I think, especially with the quality of content that you're putting out there, I think you do really well. So, yeah. So hopefully I'll see it soon. That being said, as always on At the Gardens, we have a saying, which is keep your head up and keep moving forward. I think those things are really important these days. And again, thank you so much for blessing us here with your presence and talking a little bit about what I know we're both so passionate about. We will be having guests back on for panels and things like that. So I'm excited to hopefully have you back soon. And hopefully we figure out a way to work together in the future. I think that would be awesome.
I for sure love that. And I think that now that we have reconnected after being separated at birth,
it's time to live our lives. It's time to know each other. So anyway, thank you so much, Rachel. Remember that you can find At the Gardens. You can find us on creativegardensva.com. You can find us on our Facebook page. You can catch all the episodes on Apple Podcasts and all of that. We take the audio, we put it right onto the podcasts, and we would love it. I know that's for your social. Thank you so much, really, sincerely. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you, and we will talk to you soon.
I love it. All right, bye, friends.
Bye. Let's see. Okay, friends, what an amazing guest. I mean, I'm blessed. I feel like, we hit the jackpot with Rachel there. So tune in next time for another amazing guest. Remember to catch all the previous episodes on all the channels that I mentioned before. Keep your head up. Keep moving forward. From the Ohana School, bye, everyone.